All right, so let's try to solve this quadratic equation. So it's in the standard form, ax squared plus bx plus c is equal to 0. So we could try to factor it. The problem is we can't get this factor. So today we're going to talk about solving quadratic equations by completing the square. Okay, so the first step is I'm just going to move this 2 over a little bit and leave some room right here. All right, so here's the trick. I'm going to add a number in, and I'm going to subtract it right back away. So I'm not really going to change this equation at all. So watch this. I'm going to add 9, and I'm going to subtract 9. I didn't change anything. 9 minus 9 is 0. This is still the exact same equation as it is up here. But now, this part that I have underlined will factor. That will factor as x plus 3 and x plus 3. Okay. Then I can simplify this part. Negative 9 plus 2 is negative 7. If I've got x plus 3 times x plus 3, I can write that as x plus 3 squared. And I can add 7 to both sides to get this 7 over here. All right, then this is an easy equation to solve. I'm going to take the square root of both sides, which will give me x plus 3 equals, remember we get two solutions, plus or minus the square root of 7. Then one last step, if I subtract 3, x equals negative 3 plus or minus the square root of 7. All right, so that's all fairly straightforward and easy, but the question is, how did I know to put a 9 here? How did I know that I needed a 9? Why not a 10 or an 8 or something? So where did the 9 come from? So notice that to be able to solve this equation, I eventually had it written in this form. So I had something squared, and I was able to take the square root of both sides. So if I needed something squared, then these two had to be the same. I needed x plus 3 and x plus 3. Okay. I had a 6x, so I knew that these two numbers have to add up to be that. And then I knew that this magic number that I needed had to be the product of these two numbers. So I had the 6x, so I thought if these two have to be the same, then what two equal numbers add up to be 6? Well, that's 3 and 3. And then I also knew that 3 times 3 was 9, so I knew I would need a 9 there in order to write it like this. So simplifying that, really what I did was take half of the 6, which is 3, and I squared it and got 9, and I knew that I would need a 9 in here. So the way to get this magic number is to take half of this number and square it. So half of 6 is 3, 3 squared is 9. I knew I would need to add a 9 and subtract a 9, and then I would be able to write it, or I would be able to factor it like that. All right, so let's solve this quadratic equation. So it's in the form ax squared plus bx plus c. Notice that this one will factor, so let's factor it. Okay, so I have x minus 4 minus 1. Set both those equal to 0, so either x minus 4 is equal to 0 or x minus 1 is equal to 0. So we have x equals 1 or x equals 4. So very easy to factor. And we know the solutions are 4 and 1. All right, but let's do this by the other method we just learned, completing the square. Okay, so step number 1 to complete the square is I'm going to just make room for the magic number. All right, my magic number needs to be half of this squared. So what's half of 5? Well, half of 5 is 5 divided by 2. So come over here, let's do a little scratch work. So my magic number is going to be half of this number. So that'll be 5 over 2. we're going to say negative 5 over 2 squared. Negative 5 over 2 squared is 25 over 4. Okay, so my magic number is 25 over 4. So I'm going to add 25 over 4, and I'm going to subtract 25 over 4. This part will now be able to factor into x minus what needs to go here, 5 over 2, and x minus 5 over 2. Okay, so 5 over 2 plus 5 over 2 is 10 over 2, which gives you 5. Okay, so these add up to be that. They multiply to get me 25 over 4. 5 over 2 times 5 over 2 is 25 over 4. So we have it factored correctly. We need to simplify this. In order to add fractions, you need a common denominator. So we have negative 25 over 4 plus 4 over 1. So that'll be negative 25 over 4 plus 16 over 4. Had to get a common denominator. Negative 25 plus 16 is negative 9. So I have minus 9 over 4 equals 0. I'm going to rewrite this so that it looks like that. So these are the same. I can write them as squared. I'm going to add 9 over 4 to both sides. I'm going to take the square root of both sides. So I will get x minus 5 over 2 equals plus or minus the square root of 9 over 4. Now, the square root of a fraction, I can do the square root of the top over the square root of the bottom. Square root of the top is 3. Square root of the bottom is 2. So that'll be 3 over 2. And I can add 5 over 2 to both sides. So 5 over 2 plus or minus 3 over 2. 5 plus 3 is 8. So I have 8 over 2. Or 5 minus 3 is 2 over 2. So x equals 4 or 1. Okay, so that's the same answer as we got by factoring. Obviously, it was a lot easier to factor this equation and solve it than it was to complete the square. So you should always check and see if the equation will factor first. That'll be a lot easier way to solve it. If you can't solve it by factoring, then you may want to complete the square. All right, let's look at another example. So notice this is a little different. My a is not 1 in this case. My a is a negative 2. All right. If your a is not 1, you need to add one more step in the procedure. And it'll make it much easier if we make this a, this leading coefficient, be a 1. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to divide both sides of the equation by negative 2. So if I divide both sides by negative 2, and remember this negative 2 has to go with each one of these terms, so I will have x squared minus 8x plus 1 equals 0 divided by negative 2 is 0. So always make your leading coefficient be 1 first. It'll make it way easier to complete the square. All right. Next step, I'll leave room for the magic show. All right, to get the magic number, I'm going to take half of this number and square it. Half of negative 8 is negative 4. Negative 4 squared is 16. So I'm going to add 16, and I'm going to subtract 16. Then I'm going to factor these things. Okay, so these first three terms will factor as x minus 4 times x minus 4. So x minus 4 squared. I'm going to simplify these. 1 minus 16 is negative 15. And I'll go ahead and add that to the other side. So equals positive 15. Then I'll take the square root of both sides. X minus 4 is equal to plus or minus the square root of 15. I'll add 4 to both sides. And I have my two solutions.